to today's webinar. My name is Cameron. It's great to have you here. I'm very excited to get everything going today. Hopefully you all are doing fantastic. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a little bit, but I want to give an opportunity for people to come in, get acclimated, get set up here, and then we're going to jump in and get started. If you can hear me, see me okay, let me know in the chat. Go ahead and just write in. Let me know you're able to hear me okay. I want to make sure that we're good as far as technology goes before we jump in and get started with the webinar today. We'll also want to make sure that we're live on YouTube, which it looks like we are. Hopefully all of our YouTube people are doing well. Perfect. All right, well, we're going to jump in and get started. A couple quick housekeeping things before we do. So if you are on Big Marker, up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the Handouts tab. If you click on that, you can download the handout that I'm going to be going through today. And if you are on YouTube watching this via live stream, we have the handout in the description of the YouTube live stream, so you can download it there. And typically with these webinars, if this is one of your first webinars with Dubsado, welcome. It's great to have you. Typically with these webinars, how I like to do them is go through all of the material first, and then I'll open it up at the end for a live Q&A. So if you want to ask me questions about the material that we go through today, just hold on until the end, and then we'll open it up and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. So everything looks good. I think we're going to dive in here and get started. One last thing before we do, though, if you are on a Big Marker here and you registered for the webinar, you will receive a recording of this webinar about 24 hours after we're finished, and it'll automatically go out to you there. And of course, if you're on YouTube, this will be on our YouTube channel. So if you want to revisit this at a later time, you can absolutely do that. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, we have some awesome stuff to get into today. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you so that you're all able to see. And it looks like that is sharing there. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about unlocking the power of client data and how you can organize your projects page and export. We have a brand new export CSV feature that I'm going to show you today. And this is going to allow you to make better business decisions. And for those of you who just joined us, like I said, my name is Cameron. I'm the Director of Education here at Dubsado, and I'm very excited to jump in here. So quick thing with the agenda, what we're going to be covering today. The first thing is we're going to talk about organizing the projects page. And this is very important if you're wanting to use the export CSV feature. You have to have your projects page organized. So we're going to talk about that first. We're going to talk about filtering the projects page, how you can use the filter option. Then we're going to talk about the export CSV feature that we released a few months ago. And then we're going to talk about just creating a chart in Google Sheets so you can understand the power of what you're able to do once you actually have that CSV file. So let's go ahead and dive into organizing the projects page. So I've broken this down into 4 different segments. And if you're newer to Dubsado or you've been here for a while, there's probably a chance that you've heard some of these concepts, and maybe you're not sure what one of these concepts are, or maybe you've mistaken one for another one. So what I want to do with this webinar specifically, and the core of what we're going to talk about today, is what each one of these things are and how you can utilize them to organize your projects page. And those 4 things are project titles, project tags, project statuses, and project sources. I know that sounds like a lot, but trust me, once we're done with this webinar, you're going to feel confident to know exactly what each one of these things does. So the first one that we're going to talk about is project titles. So project titles, when you're inside of Dubsado, this is pretty self-explanatory, but it's the title of each project. And what the purpose of these titles should be is to show what service you're doing for the client. And something that we recommend when you're developing your project titles, number one is that you should really come up with a consistent naming convention for all of your project titles. What you don't want to do is have some that have a naming convention one way, and then you title other projects a different way. You want to develop a consistency in how you title your projects. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. So what I usually recommend doing, and this is just kind of a personal preference for me, is that I usually like to include two things inside of a project title. Number one, I like to include the name of the client or the company name that you're working with. And then two, I like to include what you're doing for the client. What's the service that you're doing? And there's some reasons for that. So let's jump over to Dubsado here and we'll talk about this a little bit further. So when I come over here to Dubsado, you can see this is just an exact image of what we just looked at in the handout here, but you can see all of my project titles have a similar naming convention. It has the name of the person, or the last name in this case, what it is that I'm doing for the client. So engagement, wedding, anniversary, engagement shoot, anniversary shoot. And then I've also included the date in there. And you don't always have to have the date of the project in there, but it might help moving forward if you're planning on using client portals, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. And you'll understand why I'm using this type of naming convention. So all of that to say, the two things that I recommend when you're titling your projects is include the name, and then, or company name if you're working with a company, and then include the service that you're doing with the client. So developing a solid naming convention is very important when you are organizing your projects page. And like I said, a little bit later, you'll understand why it's so important. But again, the purpose of this is to show what service you're doing for the client. The next thing that we're going to talk about are project tags. And project tags, as you can kind of see here, are these little colorful dots that are at the end of all of the project titles. So when I come back over to Dubsado, you'll see that I have these. And if I hover over the top of these, it will show the tags that are associated with this project. So out of state, engagement, wedding, anniversary, engagement. So you can kind of see here, I'm tagging these projects, and you can see those next to the end of the project title. The purpose of project tags is to show what type of service you're offering or the type of client that you're working with. So I always like to associate tags with types of clients. So like I said, whether that's a certain demographic of a client that you're working with, what type of service you're doing for the client, anything that you want to use to identify the type of client that you're working with or the type of project that you're working with, you can use project tags for that. So you can kind of think about tags just like social media hashtags, where you can have multiple different tags on a client or project if you want to. And later in this webinar, we're going to talk about filtering, which is really going to come into play based off the tags that you put on these clients. So like I said, you can put as many tags as you want to on a client, multiples, but it should be what type of service you're offering or the client that you're working with. So with project tags, what I want to show you really quickly is how to create those. So let's jump over to Dubsado again here, and we're going to go over to the right-hand side under Customize. And if I click on that, we'll scroll down to the bottom. We're going to talk about all of these here next, so don't worry about those right now. Down here at the bottom, you'll see where it says Tags. And this is where you can create all the different tags that you want to use on your projects. So as you can see, I have wedding, engagement, anniversary, out of state, in state. A lot of times I've seen people do one-on-one coaching, group coaching, logo design, website design, website maintenance. There's all of these different types of tags that you can create. But again, the best thing to do is to ask yourself, who are the types of clients that I'm always searching for? What types of clients or what types of projects am I constantly searching for? Those should be your project tags. And then what you can do once they're created here, by clicking add tag, you can create those there. Back on the projects page, if we jump back over there, if you click into a project, over on the left-hand side, you'll see where it says tags. And if you see that there, this is where you can actually add in your tags. So anniversary, end state, wedding, you can put all of your tags on this project. And like I said, if you want to add multiples, that's completely fine. You can definitely add those in there. So that's where you can create them and how to add those into a project. Now, there are ways in workflows, if you're familiar with workflows or if you've heard about workflows, where you can add tags automatically. We're not going to get into that during today's webinar because we just want to cover the basics when it comes to just organizing your projects page, but there are ways to add them automatically via a workflow. So that is possible if that was a question that anybody had there. So another question that you're probably asking yourself here is, isn't it redundant to add the service, client name, or date to the project title if you already have project tags that you're adding to the project? You can see the client name, you can see the date. Why would you want to add all that extra information into the project title? That's probably what you're thinking. So on the projects page, one thing that's really important to know is that the project tags are only visible for you as the business owner. Clients cannot see the tags that are associated with the projects. This is strictly for back-end use. And it's going to be really helpful when we get into exporting the CSV. You're going to want to have tags on there. But why do we want to put all of that in the project title? So what you can do here is, if I go down to a client, I'm going to jump into Kathy's project here, and we're going to log into Kathy's client portal so you can see why having a solid naming convention is really important if you're planning on using the client portal. So I'm going to copy Kathy's password, and we're going to dive into the client portal here. And if you're not familiar with a client portal is where your clients can log in and they can see all of the forms, projects that they have with you, the contracts, invoices, appointments. It's basically a locker, if you will, where you can give them the key to that locker and they have access to all the projects that you've done with them. So we have some other information on our YouTube channel that we've done webinars that go into the client portal. So we won't cover this area in a lot of detail today, but just to show you why naming conventions are important. So let's take Kathy here, for example, and I'm going to click on the projects tab where Kathy can see all of the projects that I've done with her. So in here, if I click on this projects dropdown, you'll see that I have 2 projects in here that I've done with Kathy. I've done an engagement session, and I've also done a wedding session, or I have a wedding session coming up. So every project that you do with a client is all inside their singular client portal. So if Kathy wanted to see information from the engagement session that we did back in September of 2021, I can click here and I can access the contract from that project, the invoice from that project. Or if Kathy wants to see information pertaining to the wedding that she has coming up, she can click here and see the invoice related, the contract related, all of that. So as you can see in the project dropdown, why it's so important to have a solid naming convention is if you're going to use the client portal, you want your clients to be able to identify the project very easily. So including the date might be really good, or at least putting the service of what you're doing in there, so that way they can identify the project easily and they're not confused about what does this project mean or what does this project title mean. So if you are planning on using the client portal, that's a very good reason to have a very good naming convention. The other reason that it's important to include maybe the company name, the name of the person that you're working with, all of that information, is because there are places in Dubsado where if you're searching for a certain project, it only shows the project title. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go to the task section and I'm going to add in a new task here. If I want to create a task for a certain project, I could say get pricing out to client. If I'm going to assign this task to a project and I click this project drop down, all I'm going to see here is the project title. I can't see the client that's associated with that project. So by adding in the client's name into the project title, now I can identify a lot easier on my end which project this needs to go into. If all of my projects just say website lead capture form, website lead capture form, all the way down, I'm not going to know which project to put this task in. So by coming up with a naming convention that includes that client name or other data in there, now I can say, oh, I actually want to add this to my lead project, which it needs to go in here or needs to be for Taylor, things like that. So that's just a quick example on why I recommend putting in the client name in there. Again, you can come up with your own naming convention, but those are just some tips and tricks that I have when it comes to that specific naming convention. So the next thing that we're going to talk about are project statuses. So let's jump over there. And project statuses are designed to show where the client is at in the customer journey or the process. Now, I could do an entire webinar just on project statuses. So we'll try to move through these as quickly as possible, but these are very important when it comes to tracking where your client is at in the overall customer journey. The best way to think about your project statuses is to ask yourself, which milestones in my process do I want to keep track of? So let's jump into Dubsado here. We'll go back to our projects page, and we're going to talk about project statuses, which are up across the top here. So before we get into all of these smaller statuses, because depending on where you're at in your Dubsado setup, you might not have these statuses in here, or maybe you've added some in already and you're kind of confused about what they do. So the first thing that we'll talk about before we dive in a little bit further is the difference between leads and jobs. This is very important and is going to be important when we talk about exporting with the CSV feature. So jobs, you can see I'm in the job section here. These should all be projects that have booked with me, meaning that they've signed a contract with me. Maybe they've paid a deposit or they've made a full payment. However, you as a business owner would say, okay, I consider this client booked. Those projects should be over here in the jobs area. On the flip side, everything over here in leads, if we click over to leads and all, these should all be projects that the clients have not booked with me yet. So that means maybe I need to have a consultation with them still. Maybe I've sent them pricing. Maybe they've even submitted a proposal, but they haven't signed a contract yet, or they haven't made a payment. Anything in that realm where you're still trying to nurture that lead, all of those projects should be listed in your lead section over here. Just by having those two distinctions, leads and jobs, you're already getting some good organization on this projects page, because this is going to be where you do a lot of your managing when it comes to your clients. So I have leads over here, and then over here, I have all of my jobs. And so as you can see, at minimum, all of these projects have a signed contract because that's where they should be, is in the job section there. Now, let's take this one step further. Let's talk about the project statuses, the sub statuses that are in here. If I open this up, you'll see that I have all of these different milestones that the client is going through when they're considered a lead. So maybe the first thing that I need to do when I get a new lead is I need to check their availability. Then I want to send out a way for them to book a consultation with me. So I'm waiting for them to book an appointment. Then they book the appointment. Then I need to review to see if they actually want to move forward, or if I need to make some tweaks or something like that to what they're wanting. Then I'm going to send out my proposal to them. Maybe I need to follow up with them, or I'm waiting on them to sign the contract. But as soon as they do sign the contract, I would consider them a booked client at that point. So now over here in jobs, if I open this up, these are all of the milestones that the client goes through as a booked job. So they sign a contract, they pay a deposit, I send them out a welcome packet. Then I want to monitor, because this is more event-based. We'll talk about a couple examples here in a second. But this is more event-based. So I can see when they're 6 months out, 3 months out, 1 month out, what's happening this week. Are people after the event? So I'm sending out follow-ups once the event is over. All that to say, this entire flow here should be what your client process is. And you can set up these smaller milestones to keep track of where that client is at in the process. And they should theoretically be moving from left all the way to the right. Now, how you can create these is underneath customize over here on the right-hand side. And as you can see, I already have mine built in here. But what you can do is up in the top right, you'll click add status. And then you can decide the name of the actual milestone and whether or not it's a lead status or a job status. And depending on which one you pick, it will put them in your lead area or your job area. So again, the main purpose of this is to show where the client is at in your overall business process. What does that allow me to do? If I click contract signed here, I can see the clients that are just at the point where they've signed a contract. And as you can see, they've signed a contract here, but they haven't made any payments yet. If they made their deposit, that would put them into the deposit paid area, or I would want to put them in that deposit paid area. If I click here, I can see, oh, Tara's paid her deposit, and I can keep track of where they're at. Now, as far as updating these statuses, there's a couple things that you can do here. Number one, this is the one we're going to mainly talk about, is just manually updating the project status. So let's say that someone in my contract signed area, let's say Kathy, she makes the deposit. I can simply go over to her project and I can update the status of the project to deposit paid. And that would move that project into the next milestone. And I can do this for all of my different projects if I want to. Now, you're probably asking yourself at this point, or saying to yourself, I don't want to do this manually. There are ways in workflows similar to tags that we talked about where you can move things automatically. So if someone does make the deposit, a workflow can move them into the next status automatically for you to deposit paid. So there are ways to do this automatically, but just for this webinar, we're going to show how to do this manually and update your project statuses. The other thing you can do is if you go into the project, right underneath the tag area where we were at, you can also update the status right here. So if you're inside a project, you want to update it there, you can do that over on the left-hand sidebar as well. So all in all, with project statuses, I know this is, kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do for my project statuses and all of that? But the main thing here is, what milestones do you want to monitor in your process, and then split those up between jobs and leads. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do for you is to give you some examples of what project statuses you might be thinking about. And some of these here, what I want you to pay attention to is that all of these they're all milestone based, and it's all based off of something that's happened in the process. So in the leads area, you could have new inquiries, consultation scheduled, qualifying the lead, or I have needs review there, intake form sent or intake form completed, awaiting booking, proposal pricing sent, follow up. All of these things have to do with clients that aren't booked with you yet. And then on the flip side, underneath jobs, you can have contract signed, deposit paid, or even just payment made. You could do client portal sent, current or active client. Maybe you don't want to do all of the granular things and you just want to say they're a current or active client. You could do it that way. Then you could have things that are more time-based, like what I was saying there, where they're 6 months out, 3 months out, 1 month out. You could do it more time-based like that if you do events. The other thing that you can do when it comes to the actual project portion of it, maybe you're in web design or in a design field, you could make your milestones the different phases of your project. So the research phase, the design phase, the troubleshooting phase, and then you could go into the launch phase, and then maybe website maintenance. So you can develop your different phases of the project if you're more project based. But as you can see, there's a lot of different things you can do. It all just depends on your specific business and what you want to monitor. You could do onboarding call booked, post-event, or offboarding. All of these are event-based or milestones of where that client is at in the overall flow. So one tip that I want to give here before we move into project sources is, when it comes to making better business decisions, I know that's why we're all here, is how is this going to allow me to make better business decisions? If you have these set up as where they're at in the process, what this allows you to give an inside view of is where the bottlenecks are in your business. I'll give you a great example. If you were to send out a lot of proposals and contracts to people, or even in the follow-up area, and you see that this is at, let's say, 25 proposals and contracts sent, what that would tell me as a business owner is they're either not understanding my proposal, maybe it's my pricing, maybe when it comes to my proposal, I need to follow up with them. Maybe I'm not doing any follow-ups at all with them right now, and I need to follow up with them. Maybe it means that on my actual proposal, I need to include some instructions on how to move through that process, especially if you're doing that proposal, contract, and invoice sequence. A lot of times, clients might not understand how to move through that process. So maybe on the proposal or in the email you send them, laying out instructions on how to move through that, maybe that will push people through that bottleneck. Or maybe it's back here where you're sending out a lot of consultations with people and you're waiting for a lot of people to book. Maybe you need to send out a follow-up to them and say, hey, are you still interested in hearing about my services? Maybe in the jobs area, you might notice that there might be a certain design proof that you need them to fill out. Maybe there is a project details questionnaire that needs to be submitted, and you find out a lot of people are getting hung up there. So I'll say this, if you have it set up this way, can really help you see, oh, wow, I have a lot of bottlenecks at this point in my process. And then you can dive in there and say, why is it that people aren't moving through that bottleneck? And you can kind of analyze that to see and maybe switch some things around to help them move through that process a little bit better. So that's definitely something that can help you make some better business decisions, is making sure your project statuses are set up correctly, because then you can kind of see where your bottlenecks are at in your business process. So the last thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to organizing your projects page is project sources. And project sources are designed to show how this client heard about you. So this all has to do with where your leads are coming from. And what you can do here is, if we go back to Dubsado, we're going to go up to the reporting section and we're going to go to project sources. And this is where you can actually create your sources. And I'm going to show you here in a second how you can have your clients fill out where they heard about you on a lead form, so that you don't have to manually add these into a project. But these should all be your different sources of where people can hear about you: Facebook, Google, Instagram, LinkedIn, referrals, Yelp. Anywhere where you have the ability to collect traffic from people, those should be your project sources. And what that's going to allow you to do is collect that information so you can find out where the most traffic is coming from your business. So how you can actually add these into a project, let's talk about that for a second. Once you've created these different options, if we go into a project, we'll go back into Kathy's here. Down at the very bottom of the project, in the bottom left, you'll see referral source. This is where you can add in where this client heard about you. And so if you have projects that you've already been working on and you haven't done it automatically, which I'm going to show you next, you can just go in and add those sources in, and that's going to start to collect that data on the back end. And again, once we get into the CSV export, this is going to be very important. Now, as far as having clients fill out where they heard about you so you don't have to do this manually, let me give you this quick tip here. If we go into forms, and I'm going to go over to the lead capture form. This is the form that you can put on your website, that you can put on Instagram or Facebook, or all of those different places where you're trying to collect leads from. When someone fills out a lead capture form, it automatically creates a new project for you. So what you can do on this form, besides asking first name, last name, email, all of that generic contact information, is you can use this element over here called project tracking. And what that allows you to do, if you add that element onto your form, it says, how did you hear about us? And now if I click in here, I can add all of my project sources onto this actual question or this element. So now when a client is first hearing about me, they can go in and they can say, I heard about you from here. And that's going to automatically add it into that project instead of you having to manually go in and add it to all of your projects every time a new lead comes in. So that's just a quick tip for you. If you're wanting that to be more automated, you can do that with a project tracking element on your lead form. So that way they can select it, it gets added to the project, and you can start to collect that data. So tip number 2 that I wanted to give as far as making better business decisions, this is a way where you can really start to see where all of your traffic is coming from. So you can sort of double down maybe on that specific window, or you could say, hey, maybe my magazine and article leads that are coming in are really low. Maybe I want to increase how many people are hearing about me through Yelp or through LinkedIn. And I'll show you a couple things here in a little bit that can help you identify where all of your people are coming from in more of a graph way. So all that being said, I know we covered a lot there with all of those different things. With these 4 things, and this is a really great summary if you want to use this in the handout just to see a kind of a breakdown of all the different things. Here's a nice summary for you. Project titles should show what service you're doing for the client. Project tags show what type of service you're offering or client you're working with, the types of projects you're working on. Project statuses show where the client is at in the customer journey or your business process. And then project sources show how that client heard about you. So with all of those things together, what we're able to do is organize our projects page in a way that gives us really great information as to what's happening in Dubsado as far as our clients and projects are concerned. So what I want to show you next is going to be how to filter this page. But before I do that, some homework for you. If you're saying this all looks really great, but right now my projects page is an absolute disaster, what can I do to fix all of this? If you have a lot of projects on your projects page that are unorganized, we do have an option over here. If you see these little check boxes, you can actually highlight these. So let me go over to leads for a second. And let's say I want to bulk update and move things over into other statuses. What I can do here is I can select as many projects as I want to here, and then I can click this drop down and I can decide to update the project status. I could bulk add tags onto these projects. So if your projects page is not organized the way you want it to be, some homework for you, you could just go in here during this week, over the weekend, move at least your leads over into jobs if they're booked with you. And then you can start to create your statuses, create your tags, and then do this bulk update where you can update your different projects. So that way, when you come into this page here, you feel a sense of organization, a sense of calmness that I can click through here and say, okay, let me click on 3 months out. I only have one project in there. It's Sharon. Her anniversary is July 15th. So I have about 3 months before that happens. 1 month out. If I click over here, Patricia Owens is in June. So that's within the next month. So they're at that section. So you can kind of see here, I can find any project that I want to just by organizing this projects page. Now, a few other things here, and then we're going to wrap everything up, and then I will be happy to answer questions. Is let's talk about filtering the projects page here. So if I go to my projects page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on jobs all. So this is showing all of my jobs right now. Up here, you'll see a filter button. If you click on that, you can filter out your projects by tags. You can do it by teams and users. You can also do it by project source if you want to. The one I want to look at though is tags. If I click on this, I can see all of my jobs that are engagement projects. So if I click on this, it's going to bring up every project that has that tag on there. This is why having those tags is so important, because now if I want to go to, and this, I don't have as many projects in here as maybe some of you do, but if I want to see all of my contract signed clients that are, let's just say wedding, if I click that, it's only going to bring up people who are in contract signed and have that tag. So what I'm doing is I'm using a combination of my statuses, and I'm also using the filtering option to narrow in exactly what kind of projects I'm looking for. Maybe I want to see in the next 3 months, who are all of my anniversary clients? So I could click that, and I have Sharon. So it's the only project, obviously, but you can see here how awesome that would be to be able to say, this week, who are all of these types of clients that I have coming up? And you can really start to combine your statuses and tags to work together to figure out exactly what information you're looking for so you feel organized when you come into this page here. Now, speaking of filtering, the last thing that we're going to talk about here, and then we'll wrap everything up, is exporting the client data. So now that we have everything organized, how can I use this data to maybe put into Google Sheets when I have an export CSV option here? So inside of Dubsado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this here, and I'm going to go to combined. What combined does is it combines all of my leads and all of my jobs. So this is going to be everybody, all 13 projects that I have, leads, jobs, everything combined. So I'll click on all so I can see everybody. And then I'm going to click export right here. Now, before I do that, it's important to know that when you click export, it's going to export whatever status you have showed up here. So if I were to click here and click export, it's only going to export my contract signed list here. It's not going to be everybody. If I wanted to export just a list of my jobs, I need to click there first before I do this export option. So that's why I clicked on combined, so I can get a list of everybody, all my leads, all of my jobs, and I can click export. Now, if you've been with us for a while in Dubsado, our export CSV feature was very minimal. You could get like the project title, you could get the client name, and you could probably get maybe like their address. Maybe their start date, I think, used to be in there. It was very limited as to what data you can actually export out into a CSV file. Now, with this new feature, we can export a lot of information. But before I dive in here to kind of show you what settings I would recommend, what you'll see is down at the bottom, these are for all of my people who are watching this webinar who are familiar with custom mapped project fields. You can also do those. So whether they're custom mapped project fields or custom mapped client fields, you can add those in there as well to this CSV export. So if you are familiar with those, you're able to add those down here at the bottom if you want to show those as well. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you sort of the settings that I recommend so that you can get a good idea of the types of clients you're working with and all of that good stuff. What I would say is you could do project title if you want to. I would say lead and job. Now that you have a good understanding of the differences between those, so lead and job, I'm going to do project status. I'm also going to do, we'll do contract status. We'll add that in there. We'll do created date. I think that that is kind of important to know when they came in. You can do start date and end date. I'll just keep start date in there for right now. Tags. Now that we know we can put tags on these projects, we're going to do that. We're also going to do project source as well, so we can see where our leads are coming from. With the invoices, you don't really need to do this unless you're looking just for invoice numbers, but technically you can go into reporting and transactions and you can see how much money you have coming in or your chart of accounts in Dubsado. But if you want to, you could do all invoices paid so you can see how much money has come in through a specific project. And then you can do client details as well if you want to. Just for this example, I'm going to leave those off because I have the client details sort of in my project title. You can turn those on if you want to. Either way is fine. But let's just put those on there right now so you can see what happens with the CSV export. So what I did was I exported this already before this webinar so you can see what this looks like in Google Sheets so I don't have to go in and add it into Google Drive and all of that. But when you click export, it will download a CSV to your computer. Now in Google Sheets, let me pop over there. This is what this can look like once you export it. Now, I moved some columns around so that it kind of is organized. I stretched some columns out so that you can see this data here. But this is what this can give you if you have everything organized the right way. So over here, I can see my created date when people came into Dubsado. So I could, if I'm really proficient with Google Sheets, I could maybe see, created date and put that against leads and jobs. I could do different things like that with a chart. I can see project titles, whether they're a lead or a job. I can see their project status. So I can see sort of, where people are at here. the contract status. If you haven't sent them a contract, then it will be blank, which, as you can see with my leads here, I haven't sent them a contract yet. If they have a start date to their project, the tags, which we just talked about, and the sources as well. So a couple cool things that you can do here, and then we'll wrap everything up. For example, let's say that I highlight all of my tags here. So I can highlight these in Google Sheets, and then I can go over to Insert, and I can say Chart. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a chart for me based off of all of these tags to show me, out of all of those projects I exported, sort of what service are people more drawn to with my business. So this kind of gives me more insight into what business is really taking off, which one is lagging. In here, you can see right now that wedding is sort of my main area right now. That's taking up a big portion of my business. Same with engagement. That's really high as well. So with this data, I can sort of see, okay, so this is what I could lean more into since it's really popular, or maybe I want to try to figure out how to bring up something that's a little bit lower on the scale. So you can use that information. Another one, if you want to, is you can click and highlight over source if you want to there and do the same thing. You could come up here and say Insert Chart. And this is going to give me a project source breakdown, which I'll talk about here in a second because we actually have this in Dubsado. But if you wanted to add this to your Google Sheet, you could. So if we do this here, you can see that Instagram and referrals are the main areas where people are finding out about me. So I could say, okay, if I'm getting a lot of traffic from Instagram, I need to make sure that my Instagram is on point and continue to work at it, because that's where a lot of people are finding me. So I need to make sure that everything looks great on my Instagram and it's easy to get a hold of me. You could take your lead capture, put it in your bio so people can start to fill things out there. Or maybe I say to myself, well, LinkedIn is really low, so I'm not going to worry about it as much. Or maybe I really need to get my LinkedIn game up a little bit, so I'm going to focus on that to see if we can elevate that a little bit as well. So as you can see, if you have this organized, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Google Sheets. Now, I will say I'm not super proficient with Google Sheets, but maybe someone watching is. But if you have this data, you can sort of create the different charts that you're looking for to give you an idea of what's happening with your business. Now, the last thing that I will show you is you can, in Dubsado, where you see this pie chart of the sources, you can technically do this in Dubsado under, if we back out of here, under reporting and project breakdown. You can find out that information here. Now, this is in the year to date, so some of this information won't show up here, but you can customize this and kind of find out where your project sources are located at. Just to give you an example here, I'll go back to where these were first created at. So let me dive in here and update the dates on this just so you can see what it looks like. We'll do July 1. So this will also kind of give you the same idea of where you're getting your traffic from as well. You can kind of use this if you want to, or if you want to do the CSV export, so it's all kind of on one sheet, you can do that as well. So as you can see, if you organize your projects page in the right way, you can get a ton of data on your clients and start to see, this is where I'm getting my traffic. This is where bottlenecks are happening in my business process. These are the services that a lot of my clients are drawn to, or these are my bigger money makers. There's a lot of ways you can use this client data to make better business decisions. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Let me jump back over to my projects page here. If you do have questions, go ahead and write those in the Q&A section in big marker. And then on YouTube, I'm going to pop over there and I'm going to take a look at some of the questions over there as well. So let me look here at the Q&A section and we'll spend about 10, 15 minutes-ish answering questions. Again, if you do have to go right now, I thank you so much for attending the webinar. I really appreciate it. It was great to have you here. You will receive a recording of this in about 24 hours or so if you registered for the webinar. And it's also going to be in our YouTube channel as well if you want to replay it there. So let's go ahead and answer some questions here. In the future, will we be able to select a reason we are archiving a project and see that data CSV style? That's such a great question, Alicia. And I actually thought about this prior to the webinar. As far as if it's in our roadmap, it's not in our roadmap at the moment, but what I would recommend doing is you could technically create the reason as a tag right now. And if you do archive a project, tag them with that reason. And then in the CSV export, that would show up when you're doing a chart. I did think about that. Right now, we don't have anything that can show the reasoning, so a tag would probably be the best option for right now. Let's see here. Under the source, can you manually add other with a drop down for them to insert additional information? So Sharon, at the moment, there's not a way to do other, but what I would do on your lead capture form, let me actually come back over into my project here. What I would do on your form is I would add other as an option on your project source. And then in here, you could add in maybe a short answer element underneath just so that you can collect that information. It won't necessarily translate into your numbers because you just have other as a source, but at least you would know that it's other and you could sort of go through and see where that's coming from there. So that's kind of the only option we have as far as other. So try to put in as many as you can in the referral sources. That way you can kind of get a good understanding of where those leads are coming from. Next question here. If projects show a great deal of information with the client journey, what do you use workflows for? That's a great question, Sharon. So technically what you want to do, and this is probably my absolute favorite thing that Dubsado does, is what you want to do ideally with your projects is you want your workflow to match what's happening up here in your status. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say that I have this status that is awaiting consultation. What the workflow can do behind the scenes is it can send them that scheduler template and then update the status on the back end so you don't have to. Once the client books the actual consultation, the workflow can move them into consultation booked. Then let's say we get to where I'm sending out the proposal. The workflow actually sends the proposal and contract out to the client. And then once they submit it, it can move it into the next status, or once they sign the contract, the workflow can move them. So the workflow is important for two reasons. One, it actually does the things that are happening here. So it sends them the proposal, it sends them the intake form, it sends them the scheduler templates. And then also, once the client actually has progress on those things, the workflow also moves them into the right milestone. So you're not having to do that manually. So those are kind of the two reasons why you still want to use workflows. What this does is just give me a view of what's happening. The workflow is what's actually doing the work behind the scenes. So hopefully that makes sense about the difference between those two. Let's see here. Is there a way to export with proposals forms to see what clients pick as popular packages? That would be the big data I'm looking to see, is a report on what things client pick the most of on the proposals. So there's two things with that, Jamie. Number one is that if you use the tags as your different services, so just to kind of give a general example, let's say you have bronze, silver, and gold, and those are your different packages. You can tag your projects with those services, so that would show up in a CSV export. So you can absolutely do it that way. The way that I would probably recommend doing is, especially when it comes to something like this about what services people are looking for, is to actually create an income category in your chart of accounts. So let me show you how to do that here. Underneath reporting, and then go down to chart of accounts. What you can do here is you can actually create your different services as income categories, and you can add these income categories to your packages. So when someone is on a proposal and they're picking and choosing what they want, once they make that payment, that money goes into these different income categories. So in this chart of accounts, just to give you an example, here's some of my packages: the Senorita, the Strawberry Bubblegum, the Love Stoned, the Suit and Tie. As you can see, I'm a big Justin Timberlake fan. So I have all of my different packages as income categories. And then in my actual packages, if we jump over there, I can go into, let's say, the Senorita package, and I can add that Senorita income category into my actual package. So if someone buys this, it now gets added into my chart of accounts. So I can go to my chart of accounts here and I can see Senorita. No one's buying that right now. I can do it by different dates if I want to. I can also export a profit and loss sheet if I want to as a CSV. What I can see here is, oh, my Love Stoned package right now, that's generated the most income for me. So with the specific thing that you're looking for when it comes to what packages clients are selecting, I wouldn't go with the projects necessarily. I would be more drawn towards the chart of accounts in that area. And you can put all of your add-ons in there so you can really get a good idea of what services a lot of clients are getting as far as packages are concerned. So that's what I would recommend there, Jamie. Let's see here. Are you able to capture birth month and birth date on clients so that you can create a birthday card list? Absolutely, Joan. So in that export CSV that I was showing there, when it comes to the settings that you can have, what you're able to do, you can actually see I do have a birthday as an option down here in the custom mapped project fields. How you can get that as an option so that it can export on a CSV is you want to go into the settings, and then you'll come over to custom mapped fields. So if I click on this, I can create fields that clients can enter in their information on a form, and it's going to log it underneath that client data. So a great example would be birthday, like what you are wanting. You can create this as a date select element that you can put on your form, and it can say, hey, when's your birthday? I want to send you something. They'll put in their birthday, and then what you can do is you can have that exported out in your CSV. So I can go back over to projects, click export, and then I can turn birthday on. So that way it's in my CSV. And then once it's in there, now I could create some type of a list through that Google Sheets there. So that would be absolutely something that you could do there, as long as you have it as a custom mapped field in your brand. Let's see here. In Dubsado reporting, can you filter by tag, not just the source? So Stephanie, you're not able to search by tag in the project sources area. That's only for tags, or sorry, only for sources. Tags are strictly for the project's page. So hopefully that makes sense there. There's not a way to see both of those things in that area. Now, what you can do is if you go to filter on this projects page, you can filter by tags. So let's say we do wedding, and you can also filter by source as well in this filter. So I could say wedding clients who heard about me from Instagram, and I only have one, and that's Patricia. So this you can technically do. Maybe that's what you're looking for, is to see tags and sources at the same time. You can filter that way if you want to there. Alicia says for the income categories, don't those automatically go into QuickBooks if you have that set up, or is that something else that auto-populates there? That would be confusing for me to see the senorita in my QuickBooks. So right now, as far as our QuickBooks integration goes, income categories do not automatically go over into QuickBooks. So that's not an automatic thing that happens right now. So that wouldn't be something you would have to worry about at this time, Alicia. It's been something that's been requested that those actually do go over there, but right now they don't automatically transfer. So hopefully that answers your question there. Let me jump over to YouTube here to see if we have any questions on YouTube. We track inquiries monthly to see what percentage of leads schedule consultations, let's see here, and end up converting to bookings. As of now, I manually go through the forms list. Is there an easier way to do that? So Sarah, I don't know how to do this in Google Sheets, but this might be something that you could create inside of Google Sheets. There's also other platforms as well, like Mixpanel and other systems that track those sort of things that you could probably import your CSV file into that can give you a better option. But maybe the Google Sheets option, you could take that CSV or you could run it through. There's some systems that allow you to upload a CSV into it, just a internet online system, and then it can give you some of the data that you're looking for there. So that is something else I might recommend rather than going through the forms list. That would take a long time. So that would be my recommendation there. Let's see here, see if we have any other questions before I wrap things up for the day. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you again for attending. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you really got something out of this as far as organizing your Dubsado projects page. As you can see, the export CSV feature and getting that data is only possible if you really know how to title your projects, what project tags are, project statuses, and project sources. So I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And so we'll actually get this recording out to you within 24 hours, like I said, or you can revisit this on our YouTube channel at a later time. So take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.